He hit me so hard my vision turned white. And my daughter, my only child, was the one who told him to do it. I remember the cold concrete against my palms, the taste of iron in my mouth, the sound of her voice cutting through my skull. Just give us the money, Mom. $3 million. That's what all this was about. Not love. Not family. Money. When they finally shoved me out the front door, I stumbled onto the curb, shaking, bleeding, clutching my ribs, wondering when my daughter stopped being the little girl who used to braid my hair and became someone I didn't recognize. The night air burned my lungs. But through the blur of pain, a thought flickered like a match in the dark. They didn't know what I had already done, because weeks before this night I had seen it coming. It started on a Sunday morning, a week after my 71st birthday. April had called me crying. She said she missed me, said she wanted me closer, said her husband Russell agreed it would be good for everyone if I moved in. I believed her. God, I really did. They lived just outside Des Moines, in a perfect little suburban house with white shutters and a porch swing that had never been used. The kind of house you'd see in a retirement magazine. When I arrived, the guest room was spotless, fresh lilac sheets, ivory curtains, even a framed photo of us from her high school graduation sitting on the nightstand. I stood there with my suitcase still in hand and thought, maybe this will heal us. I had my own place, a quiet apartment 2 towns over. I didn't need anyone's help. I worked part-time at the library, helped organize the genealogy club, had friends who brought me tea and gossip every Thursday. But April said she wanted family dinners again. She said the kids missed me. I let myself believe that. Because what mother doesn't want to be needed? The first week was beautiful. April made me tea every night. Russell was polite. The grandkids sat on the floor while I told them stories about our ancestors coming from Wales. For a moment, I felt like a mother again. Like I belonged. But small cracks began to show. It started with April's tone, soft words that carried weight. She mentioned bills, tuition, refinancing, temporary struggles. Then Russell joined in. Over dinner, he said one of his clients had a great investment opportunity, real estate guaranteed returns. He said it like it was casual. But I've lived long enough to know when someone is testing the water. A few days later, April came into my room holding a folder. Inside were bank documents, my account numbers. She sat beside me and said gently, "It's just a short-term transfer, Mom. You'll get it all back in 6 months. You can help us secure our future for the kids." I asked how she got my financial info. She smiled tight, deliberate. "I've always known your passwords," she said. "I just like to check in sometimes, make sure you're okay." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me. Something had cracked inside me. Not just trust, but reality. I thought about my late husband, the years we spent saving, every penny tucked away so I'd never have to depend on anyone. I thought about the $2,000 I once lent April to fix her car, money that never came back. It was all so clear now. I hadn't moved into a home. I had moved into a trap. By the second week, the warmth was gone. I stopped leaving my bedroom door unlocked. The grandkids visited less. April's laughter sounded thinner, sharper. Then came the grocery receipt. She left it on the counter with red circles and a note. "Your share. Thanks." No smile. No heart. Just numbers. Later she handed me a breakdown of utilities, my portion neatly highlighted. She said it was about fairness, that fairness keeps families strong. Russell sat across the table scrolling his phone, not saying a word. I didn't argue. I just went upstairs, locked the door and stared at the paper. The amount wasn't high. But the message was deafening. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a bill to be managed. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and saw Russell quickly close a black notebook. When he noticed me, he smiled too fast. Later that night, my personal documents were out of order. I didn't need proof. I'd seen enough to recognize a pattern. The next morning, April brought up estate planning. She said, "You should simplify things, Mom. Maybe a joint account? In case of emergencies." She said it like she was doing me a favor. Like she wasn't trying to take the pen out of my hand. I said nothing. Just stirred my coffee and watched the spoon tremble. That afternoon, I drove to a grocery store parking lot and called my financial advisor. I told him to lock every account, block remote access, and alert me of any attempt to log in. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was just being cautious, but in truth I was preparing for war. The air in that house changed after that. April stopped knocking before entering my room. Russell's footsteps got heavier, slower, deliberate. Even the children avoided eye contact. I found my medicine box moved, pills missing. My mail opened. My coffee tasted strange one morning, so I poured it down the sink. Something was unraveling, and fast. Then April came to me again, holding another stack of papers. She said it was for a routine refinance. Just signatures. But when I looked closer, I saw my name listed as co-owner on a secondary mortgage. When I asked about it, she said it must have been a clerical error. That's when I knew. I wasn't just being used. I was being erased. That night, I pulled out a folder I'd kept hidden inside the lining of my suitcase. It contained notarized trust documents, asset lists, and my late husband's account information. They thought I was just a lonely old woman with a small retirement fund. They had no idea I was sitting on an entirely separate portfolio, protected, diversified, and secure. But I knew they'd keep pushing. And I was done waiting to be their victim. The next morning, I drove to the bank myself. I asked to speak with the branch manager. We reviewed access logs. 2 failed login attempts from an IP tied to Russell's company. That was enough for me. I ordered biometric verification on all accounts and immediate fraud alerts. The manager looked concerned, but I told her it was handled. When I returned home, dinner was already set. Pork roast, mashed carrots, wine poured. Russell asked how my day was. Quiet, I said. He smiled. And that's when I knew the calm before the storm had begun. 3 days later, I woke up to find my room torn apart. Drawers opened, suitcase emptied, the hidden lining ripped. My flash drive was gone. I didn't scream. I just stood there watching the pieces fall. Then I walked downstairs. April was at the counter, stirring her coffee like nothing had happened. Russell leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, smirking. Did someone go through my things? I asked. April didn't look up. Maybe one of the kids. Russell shrugged. You sure you didn't misplace something? Their lies came too quickly. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked back upstairs. Behind a stack of books on my shelf was an old landline phone, one no one knew about. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. My lawyer's assistant answered. I gave her a code word. Within minutes, everything was in motion. By the time the sun set, my entire financial network was sealed tighter than a vault. They thought they'd broken me, but they had just activated the one part of me they'd forgotten existed. The woman who learned long ago how to survive being underestimated. And that night, while they slept under their own roof of lies, I began to take back everything they thought was already theirs. I left that house the next morning, long before the sun came up. Not for good, not yet. I just needed air, space, silence. I drove to a diner 20 miles away, the kind that smells like burnt coffee and old dreams. I sat in the corner booth with my tea going cold, staring at my reflection in the window. My face looked different. Not because of age, because of clarity. I wasn't the naive woman who believed in second chances anymore. I was a mother who finally realized her daughter had been rehearsing love like a script. By the time I drove back, the house felt colder. April was in the kitchen, slicing apples for the kids. She smiled like everything was fine. You're up early, she said. I couldn't sleep. Russell came in behind her, kissed her shoulder, then glanced at me. His eyes didn't blink long enough. You know, he said casually, April and I were talking. We think it's time to put your affairs in order. You're 71, Mom. Planning ahead is smart. Planning ahead. The words slithered around the room like snakes. I just nodded, pretending to agree. You're right, I said softly. It's time I get my life in order. But what I didn't tell them was that I already had. That afternoon, I met my lawyer in person. I handed him the flash drive's duplicate copy, the one they didn't know existed. He scanned the documents quickly, his brow furrowing. You were right to call, he said. They've already been trying to move assets. But nothing got through. You acted just in time. Lock everything down, I said. And set a flag for any attempt in my name. He looked at me with something like pity, not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd finally seen. Do you want me to confront them? He asked. No, I said. Let them believe they're winning. It'll make the fall that much harder. When I returned home, April was sitting on the porch swing, the one that had stayed empty for years. She was holding a cup of tea and staring into nothing. "Where were you?" she asked too calmly. "Just out for a drive. You could have told me. I worry. Worry. That word again. Every time she said it, I wanted to scream, because worry was what she called control. I sat beside her. "April," I said gently. "What's really going on?" Her eyes flickered just for a second. "We're under pressure, Mom. You wouldn't understand. Russell's business hit a rough patch. The refinance didn't go through, and so this is about money." Her silence was confirmation enough. "I told you," I said carefully. "You'll have your own someday. But my savings, that's your father's legacy. I won't hand it over." April's face hardened. "Dad would have wanted to help family." "No," I said quietly. "He would have wanted me safe." For a moment I thought she might cry. But instead she stood up and walked inside, slamming the door behind her. I sat there alone, the porch swing creaking beneath me, thinking about how love can rot from the inside out, quietly, invisibly, until the day it collapses. Over the next few days, the distance between us became a war of gestures. She'd leave my laundry unfolded, skip making tea, forget to tell me about dinner plans. Russell's smiles got sharper, his voice flatter. One morning I caught him coming out of my room. He froze mid-step. "Looking for a screwdriver," he said. The lie was almost insulting. After that I started carrying my keys everywhere, even inside the house. I kept my handbag zipped and my documents locked in the trunk of my car. I didn't sleep deeply anymore. I kept my phone under the pillow, my shoes by the bed. They thought I was old, fragile, easy. They forgot I'd buried a husband, raised a child alone, and survived the kind of grief that teaches you to read danger in silence. One afternoon, I overheard them talking through the open window. Russell's voice was low but angry. "She's not signing. She doesn't trust us." April hissed back. "Then make her. She's got to realize she can't live forever." Then silence. The kind that doesn't end naturally, the kind that hangs heavy until it explodes. I stepped away before they saw me, my pulse pounding in my ears. That night, I wrote a note to myself. Don't react. Prepare. I called my lawyer again the next day. Activate the contingency, I said. He didn't ask which one. He just said, understood. The following morning, I woke to find my phone missing. It wasn't in my purse, not on the nightstand, not anywhere. April shrugged when I asked. You probably misplaced it. Later that day, a package arrived addressed to me, but April intercepted it first. She brought it up unopened, pretending she hadn't already looked inside. The return label was from my bank. That was the moment I decided it was time to go. Not just for a drive. For good. I waited until midnight. The house was quiet. Russell's snoring echoed faintly through the wall. I packed a small bag, my ID, my will, my jewelry, my backup flash drive. Then I slipped out through the back door and down the driveway. I had arranged everything already. A black sedan waited 2 blocks away. My lawyer's driver. As the car pulled off, I looked back at the house, my daughter's house, and felt a strange mix of grief and freedom. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad. Because I'd already done my mourning weeks ago. We drove through the night to a small town called Ames. I owned a little property there under another name, something I'd set up years ago just in case. It wasn't paranoia back then, just practicality. Funny how foresight looks like madness until the day you need it. The house was old but clean. White walls, no photos, just the hum of safety. That night I slept for the first time in weeks. Not deeply but peacefully. The next morning I woke to sunlight and a sense of distance so sharp it almost hurt. I called my lawyer and confirmed everything had been transferred. All funds frozen. All accounts secured under the new trust. He paused, then said, "You're clear. They can't touch a dime." I thanked him, but the truth was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because even when you win, betrayal doesn't feel like triumph. Feels like a funeral. Still, I made tea, opened the curtains, and let the light in. 3 days later it began. The calls. The emails. The messages from April. First they were sweet. "Mom, please call me. We're worried." Then they turned desperate. "You can't do this to us." Then angry. You're confused. Russell says you're not well. And finally the last one sentence, no greeting, no goodbye. You'll regret this. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Not because I was afraid. 'Cause I was finally free. But something in my gut told me it wasn't over yet. And I was right. Because 1 week later a letter came. Official. Cold. From the courthouse. April and Russell were filing a petition to have me declared mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was war. When I first read the letter, I thought it had to be a mistake. No mother believes her own child would drag her into court to steal her mind on paper. But there it was, printed in bold black ink. Petition for guardianship and declaration of incapacity. Filed by my daughter, April, and her husband, Russell. My hands trembled as I held it. Not from fear, from disbelief. It's strange the way betrayal looks when it's stamped and notarized. It's so clean, so sterile, like pain wrapped in a business envelope. I sat at the kitchen table of my safe little house in Ames, the one that smelled faintly of peppermint and dust, staring at the signature on the bottom of that petition. April's handwriting, once shaky and round when she was learning to write her name, now sleek and practiced, like she'd rehearsed how to sign away her mother's dignity. They'd accused me of being mentally unfit, of suffering from confusion, of being influenced by outside parties. They called my lawyer a manipulator. They said I'd been isolated. I almost laughed. I hadn't felt more alone than when I was living under their roof. The next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. We expected this, he said quietly. They're following a pattern. It's textbook financial coercion. When they can't get the money, they go for control. He laid out the plan like a chessboard. We'd counter with documentation, my medical evaluations, recent cognitive tests, testimony from my financial advisor, and letters from my neighbors and church members who'd known me for years. I nodded, but inside I was shaking. Not from panic. From rage. Will the judge believe me? I asked. He looked up. She'll see through them. You're clear-headed, articulate. The truth is on your side. But, he hesitated, you'll have to sit across from them in that room. Across from my daughter. Across from the woman who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and ask me to sing her to sleep. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at a framed photo of April as a teenager, holding her diploma. Her smile was wide, her arms thrown around me. I had been so proud that day. And now she wanted to erase me. I whispered into the empty room. Why, April? Was I really worth that little to you? No answer, of course. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind brushing the windows. Over the next week, the preparation consumed me. I went through old medical records, reprinted tax forms, notarized statements. My lawyer handled the legal details, but I handled the memories. Every piece of paper reminded me of a moment when I still believed in her goodness. Then came the call from Detective Monroe, the investigator from the Financial Crimes Unit. We've found something, she said. Her tone was steady, but there was an edge of grim satisfaction. Russell had been caught on camera at a bank in West Des Moines, trying to access accounts linked to my name. Twice. Using photocopied documents that didn't match the originals. Can you prove intent? I asked. We're working on it, but it strengthens your case. I thanked her and hung up. For the first time in months, I exhaled without fear. 2 days later, I had coffee with Patrice, the only friend who knew everything. She listened quietly as I told her about the court date. Then she said something that changed everything. Write to the judge. Not as a client, not as a victim, as a mother. Let her see your heart before she sees their lies. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote by hand. For pages. I didn't plan it, I just let it bleed out. I wrote about raising April alone after my husband died. About how proud I'd been of her, her brilliance, her warmth. I wrote about the little girl who once said she wanted to grow up to be just like me. And then I wrote about how she changed. About how I moved into her house thinking it was love, only to realize I'd become a source, not a mother. I wrote about betrayal dressed as concern. About the slow erosion of trust. And finally, I wrote the line that had been living in my chest for weeks. Protecting myself wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. and it came too late. When I finished, my hand was cramped, but my heart was steady. 3 weeks later, the hearing date arrived. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Sterile floors, gray walls, fluorescent lights that hummed like they were tired of watching people fall apart. I wore a navy blue suit, the same one I wore at my husband's funeral. It felt fitting, a kind of mourning, but this time for something still alive. April and Russell sat across the room. She wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked smug, confident, his arm draped behind her chair like ownership. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Then the world went silent. Their attorney spoke first. His voice was polished, rehearsed. He called me confused, isolated, emotionally vulnerable. He said my behavior was erratic, and that I was being manipulated by outsiders who wanted access to my wealth. I listened quietly, hands folded in my lap. Then he introduced their witnesses, 2 people I barely knew. They testified about my forgetfulness at a barbecue, how I repeated a story twice, how I once misplaced my keys. They made me sound like a stranger in my own life. When it was our turn, my lawyer rose. He spoke calmly, methodically, piece by piece dismantling their narrative. He presented my evaluations, signed by Dr. Kirsch, neurologist and cognitive specialist. My IQ scores, memory tests, executive function reports, all normal. Then came statements from my neighbors, friends, and colleagues. Each one spoke of my sharpness, my independence, my clarity. And then he placed my handwritten letter on the judge's desk. The room went silent while she read. Her expression didn't change at first, but when she looked up, her eyes softened. "This court," she said, "rarely receives such direct testimony. Mrs. Alden, your letter shows not confusion, but extraordinary clarity." She turned to April and Russell. "The petition is dismissed. Effective immediately." April's mouth fell open. Russell muttered something under his breath. But the judge wasn't finished. "This filing borders on abuse of process," she continued. "If further attempts are made to manipulate or defraud Mrs. Alden, this court will refer the matter for investigation." The gavel struck. And just like that, it was over. Outside, the sunlight hit my face, blinding. My knees almost buckled, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight lifting off my chest. April and Russell walked past without a word. She glanced at me once, her eyes full of something I couldn't name. Anger, shame, maybe both. I didn't follow. I didn't call out her name. I just stood there breathing. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I existed again. Not as a mother, not as a bank account, but as myself. That night, I made tea and sat by the window of my little house. The city was quiet. The air smelled like rain and renewal. My phone buzzed, a new email. It was from a women's advocacy group. Someone from the court had forwarded my letter. They wanted me to speak at an upcoming forum. "Your story could help others," the email said. I closed the laptop, not ready yet. But I smiled. Because maybe healing didn't mean forgiving. Maybe it meant telling the truth out loud so no one else would have to whisper it in secret. I went to bed that night without locking the door. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what morning might bring. The morning after the hearing, I woke up to silence that didn't feel real. No footsteps. No doors slamming. No voices raised behind walls. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint chirp of birds outside. I made tea, peppermint my favorite, and watched the steam rise in the sunlight. It looked fragile, like everything that had just collapsed. I had won, at least on paper. But victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing in the ashes of something I used to love, holding a medal I never wanted to earn. By noon, the first phone call came. It wasn't April. It was one of her friends, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She said she was just checking in. But I could hear the curiosity dripping between her words. "I heard about the court thing," she said softly. "I'm sure it's all been a misunderstanding." I didn't bother correcting her. Some people don't want truth. They want entertainment. I told her I was fine, thanked her for the concern, and hung up. After that, the phone didn't stop ringing. Voicemails, texts, Facebook messages. Old friends, neighbors, distant cousins. Everyone wanted to know what happened. No one wanted to hear how it felt. So I stopped answering. That week I stayed close to home. I cleaned, organized, cooked too much food for one person. Patrice dropped by every other day. She brought flowers and pie and stories about her cat just to fill the silence. One afternoon while we sat drinking coffee, she said, "You should be proud. You stood up for yourself. Not many women do." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Pride feels a lot like grief," I said, because that's what it was, grief. For a daughter I'd already lost long before the courtroom. 2 nights later I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed scrolling through old photos on my phone. April at 8, missing teeth and dimples. April at 16, laughing with her friends. April on her wedding day, eyes bright, hand clutching mine. I could see every version of her except the one sitting across from me in court. 2 a.m. I wrote her an email. I didn't plan to send it, I just needed to write it. "April, I don't know who you are anymore. But I remember who you were. And I still love that girl. The one who believed in kindness before she learned to measure love in dollars." I deleted it before dawn. Some things are meant to be written, not read. 3 days later my lawyer called. The detective forwarded additional findings. He said Russell's name had come up in 2 other investigations, both involving financial manipulation of elderly clients through investment schemes. It was small comfort, but it was validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. The police were building a case. Quietly, carefully. He told me I might need to testify again, not about family this time but about fraud. I said yes. If this was the price of truth, I could pay it. The news spread faster than I expected. Not headlines, not yet, but whispers. Someone at the courthouse leaked enough details that it reached social media. Within days, people were talking. Old woman wins against greedy daughter. Family fortune scandal. It was surreal, watching my private nightmare become gossip fodder. But what hurt most wasn't the strangers. It was the silence from April. She didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't apologize. Nothing. I tried not to look at her social media, but temptation is a cruel thing. Late one night I did. There she was, smiling beside Russell at a charity event, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Family first. Always." My throat went dry. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, letting the irony sink in. The next morning a letter arrived, not from her, but from their lawyer again. It was thinly veiled venom. "Our clients wish to open a dialogue to repair familial relationships and ensure your well-being." My lawyer told me not to respond, but part of me wanted to write back just to say, "My well-being started the moment you lost control of it." Instead, I shredded the letter. Every slice through the paper felt like reclaiming something they'd stolen. Days bled into weeks. The house grew less like a hiding place and more like a home. I planted tulips in the yard, reorganized my library, walked to the farmer's market on Sundays. The air felt different, lighter. But sometimes when the wind blew just right, I swore I could still hear her voice, sharp, desperate, somewhere behind me. "Mom, please, you don't understand." Maybe I never would. One afternoon, I sat with Patrice at the park. Kids were playing nearby, their laughter sharp and bright. She asked if I regretted anything. I thought about it for a long moment. "I regret trusting the wrong version of her," I said. "But not loving her. I'll never regret that." Patrice nodded. "That's what makes you stronger, not weaker." I wanted to believe her. But love, real love, leaves bruises that never fade. That night, I dreamed of the house in Des Moines. The porch swing was moving. The door was open. Inside it was dark. I could hear voices, April's, Russell's, arguing, fading, breaking. When I woke, my pillow was wet. I hadn't cried in weeks. Maybe healing isn't a straight line. Maybe it's a loop, the same pain revisited until it dulls enough to live with. The next morning, I opened my mailbox and froze. A small white envelope, no return address, my name written in April's handwriting. Inside was one photograph. It was of me, sitting on the porch swing in their yard the day I moved in, smiling. On the back, a single sentence. "You ruined everything." My hands went cold. I could almost feel her voice between the lines, that sharp mix of accusation and heartbreak. For the first time in months, I didn't know whether to be angry or afraid. Because love, when twisted far enough, becomes something dangerous. And I wasn't sure what she might do next. The photograph haunted me for days. Not the image itself. I'd seen my smile 1,000 times, but the sentence scrawled on the back. You ruined everything. I kept it in a drawer locked. But somehow it followed me anyway. Every time the phone rang, every time a car slowed near the house, my chest tightened. Patrice said I was imagining things. Maybe she's just angry, she said gently. People lash out when they lose control. I nodded, pretending to agree. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a warning. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. The clock read 2:14 a.m. At first I thought it was nothing, maybe a raccoon or the wind. But then I saw headlights flicker across the window. Someone was parked across the street. Engine running. Lights off. I stayed still, watching from the dark. After a few minutes the car pulled away. But it didn't feel random. It felt like a message. I can still find you. The next morning I called Detective Monroe. She didn't sound surprised. We'll add patrols to the area, she said. And you might want to consider a security camera. I thanked her, then hung up and sat in the quiet. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like glass, transparent, fragile, waiting to shatter. Later that day my lawyer came by with updates. Russell's financial case was moving forward. The evidence was stronger than they'd expected. Falsified signatures, altered documents, a paper trail leading straight back to his firm. But what startled me most was what he said next. April knew, he said. We found emails between them. She wasn't just complicit. She helped. I didn't answer. I just stared at him, the words echoing in my skull. I had told myself 1,000 stories to protect her. That she was manipulated, pressured, confused. But none of them survived that sentence. My daughter wasn't a victim. She was a partner. That night, I sat at the table with a cup of tea that went cold before I ever took a sip. I tried to remember the last pure memory I had of her, something untouched by lies. I saw her at age 5 standing in the backyard in a pink dress, yelling for me to push her higher on the swing. Her laughter had been so bright, so wild. Back then I thought it meant freedom. Now I realized it had just been momentum. The beginning of her learning how to fall and make others catch her. 2 days later my doorbell rang. I froze. When I looked through the peephole there was no one there. Just an envelope taped to the door. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed, not handwritten, with one sentence typed in bold. You're destroying our family. No signature. No return address. I called Patrice. She came over within minutes, clutching her purse like a weapon. We sat on the couch together, staring at the note on the coffee table. Call the police, she said. I did. 2 officers arrived, took the note, filed a report, promised to patrol the area again. Before they left, one of them said softly, "Family can get messy, ma'am. Try to stay somewhere safe for a while." I almost laughed. If only safety were that simple. That evening, I decided to do something I hadn't done since leaving Des Moines. I wrote to April. Not a plea, not a confrontation. A truth. I don't hate you. But I can't protect you anymore. You made your choices and now they're choosing you back. I hope one day you understand the difference between love and ownership. Until then, I wish you peace, even if it has to be far from me. I printed it, sealed it in an envelope and mailed it. Not because I expected her to respond, but because I needed to end my silence before it killed me. The next morning, Detective Monroe called again. Her tone was cautious. We received confirmation of some unusual activity, she said. April's been contacting multiple people about you. Reporters, financial advisors, even one of your former colleagues. She's trying to control the narrative. I sighed. Let her talk. I'm done hiding. You sure? Yes, I said. If she wants the world to know, then let them know the whole truth. And that was when I made my decision. That evening, I reached out to the same women's advocacy group that had emailed me after the hearing, the one that wanted me to speak. This time I said yes. I told them I was ready to share my story. The truth of what it means to be manipulated not by strangers, but by your own blood. They scheduled me for a small private panel the following month. Nothing huge, 30 women in a community center downtown. But it felt like something real. Like reclaiming my voice from the people who had stolen it. Patrice offered to come with me. I said yes. In the days leading up to the event, I started sleeping better. The nightmares came less often. The fear didn't disappear, but it dulled, replaced by something quieter, steadier. Resolve. Then, one morning, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line: "You think this is over?" There was no body, no attachment, just that. I forwarded it to Detective Monroe, who promised to trace it. But I didn't need proof. I knew exactly who it was. The night before the panel, it rained hard. Thunder rolled over the house, wind pushing branches against the window. I made tea and tried to focus on my notes, but my thoughts kept drifting. Would she show up tomorrow? Would she try to stop me? I told myself she wouldn't dare. But fear has a way of whispering louder than logic. I stayed up until 3 a.m., checking the locks twice. The next morning, I stood in front of a mirror I barely recognized myself in. There were new lines around my eyes, but also something else. A strength that hadn't been there before. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a survivor. When I arrived at the community center, my heart raced. The room was filled with women, old, young, tired, hopeful. Their faces carried stories I didn't know yet, but I could see the same quiet ache behind their eyes. When they introduced me, I stood, hands shaking slightly, and took a breath. "I'm not here to talk about loss," I began. "I'm here to talk about survival." And I told them everything. Not the legal jargon, not the headlines, the truth. How manipulation starts softly. How it wears a smile. How it sounds like love. How it teaches you to doubt your own mind until you almost forget who you are. When I finished, the room was silent. Then one woman stood, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." In that moment, I felt something inside me shift. A weight finally set down. After the panel, as Patrice and I walked to the car, I saw her. Across the parking lot. April. She was standing in the rain, hair plastered to her face, watching me. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Just stared. For a long suspended second, our eyes met. There was no hatred there anymore. Just emptiness. A hollow where love used to live. Then she turned, got into her car, and drove away. I didn't follow. I didn't call after her. I just stood there in the rain, letting it wash everything clean. But I knew this wasn't the end. Because people like Russell and April don't disappear quietly. And deep down I could feel it. Something bigger was coming. The day they arrested Russell, the air smelled like rain again. I remember because I was standing by the kitchen window, watering my plants, when my phone buzzed. It was Detective Monroe. "They have him," she said. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. Fraud, forgery, coercion. Enough to keep him off the streets for a long time. For a moment I couldn't speak. I just stared at the sunlight spilling through the window, at the tiny drops sliding down the leaves. "What about April?" I finally asked. Monroe hesitated. "She's cooperating." Said she didn't know the full extent of it. "But she's under review. There's talk of charges for aiding and abetting." I pressed my hand against the countertop, steadying myself. Cooperating. That word hurt more than I expected. Because deep down I knew what it really meant. She'd turned on him to save herself. And in some twisted way, that was the only smart thing she'd done in years. That night I sat outside on the porch, the same porch where my life had nearly fallen apart. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of wet earth. Fireflies blinked in the dark like tiny signals of hope. I thought about Russell behind bars, about April signing papers in some interrogation room. But mostly I thought about what was left of me. It's strange how justice feels quieter than pain. It doesn't explode. It exhales. I expected joy, maybe relief. But what came instead was stillness. A soft, aching kind of peace, the kind that comes when the war is finally over, and you realize you're the only one left standing. A week later, April called. The number flashed across my phone, and for a moment, I just stared at it. Then, for reasons I'll never understand, I answered. Her voice was fragile. "Mom." I didn't speak. "I didn't know what he was doing," she said quickly. "I swear. He lied to me. He made me believe you were losing your mind." "April." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Stop." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear her breathing. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. I wanted to protect us." "From what?" I asked softly. "From me." She didn't answer. The silence between us was enormous. The kind that fills every corner of your body until you can feel it pressing against your ribs. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But sorry doesn't rebuild what's already been burned to ash. So I told her the only truth I could live with. "I hope one day you forgive yourself," I said. "But I can't carry your guilt anymore." And then I hung up. After that call, something inside me broke, but not in the way it used to. It was a release, like glass finally shattering after years of pressure. And in the fragments, I found something unexpected. Freedom. I stopped waiting for her apology to fix me. I stopped replaying the betrayal like a song stuck on loop. I started walking again, really walking. I took morning drives with no destination. I baked bread and burned half of it. I laughed at movies alone. I cried in grocery aisles when a song from the past played too loud. I let life hurt and heal at its own pace. Months passed. Russell went to trial. April took a plea deal, community service, probation, therapy. The tabloids picked up fragments of the story, but the noise faded fast. The world moved on. And so did I. One morning, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found something I hadn't seen in years. A letter April had written when she was 10. It was crumpled and yellowed, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "Dear Mom, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you. Not the kind that yells or fights, but the kind that always gets back up. Love, April." I sat on the floor, holding that little piece of paper, and cried harder than I had in months. Because maybe, just maybe, somewhere under all the anger and greed and pain, a part of that little girl still existed. And maybe that was enough. That summer, I finally did something I'd been avoiding since the beginning. I sold the house in Des Moines. Not out of bitterness, but because it was time. I didn't need the ghosts anymore. I moved into a small cottage near a lake 2 towns over, quiet, green, surrounded by trees. The first night there, I slept with the windows open. The crickets sang, the air smelled like pine, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of the past. The next morning, I brewed coffee and sat on the porch steps, watching the sunrise. The sky burned pink and gold. The light touched everything, even the scars. A few weeks later, I received one last envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Inside was a short note. "I'm in therapy now. I'm trying. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you're okay. Love, A." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it beside the old letter from when she was 10. 2 Aprils, years apart. One full of hope. One full of regret. I didn't write back. But I whispered, "I'm okay," into the quiet room, not for her but for me. One evening in late autumn, Patrice came over for dinner. We sat by the fire sipping wine, talking about everything and nothing. At one point she said, "You know, you could write a book about all this." I laughed. "Who'd believe it?" She smiled. "Maybe that's the point. People never think monsters live in their own homes." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, I opened my laptop and began typing. Not for revenge. Not for pity. For truth. For every woman who's ever been told she's crazy when she's simply been hurt. And for the version of me who almost didn't make it out. It's been a year now. The tulips I planted last spring have bloomed again, brighter, stronger. Sometimes I sit on the porch and watch the wind move through them, and I think about how fragile things can still survive. People still ask if I'd take April back if she showed up one day. I always say the same thing. I already have. Just not the version she became. Because love doesn't die when people do terrible things. It just changes shape, softens, fades, becomes something quieter, almost sacred. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about cutting the rope that keeps you tied to their damage. And in that quiet, sunlit house by the lake, I finally did. A few months later, I spoke again at another women's event, this time with confidence instead of trembling. Afterward, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. She said, "Your story gave me the courage to leave my son's house. He was doing the same thing to me." I hugged her. Because in that moment I realized something powerful. Maybe I hadn't lost my daughter entirely. Maybe through my truth I was helping someone else save theirs. And that, I thought, was worth everything I went through.